Hi everyone, this is Abhishek here, and recently I finished reading this book called Forbidden Medicine by Ellen Brown. And what I learned was that there is indeed a lot of proof of the government manipulating things to deliberately suppress alternative treatments to cancer and alternative treatments to other things as well. Before I talk about what, according to the book, is one of the most suppressed cancer treatments ever, I'd like to talk about the man behind the treatment. But before I talk about the man behind the treatment, so this book was written by Ellen Brown, who is a litigating attorney who decided to take up this case. It was a case that she couldn't refuse. And Jimmy Keller was a man, a humble man with absolutely no medical training whatsoever, no degree. He was trained in economics as an undergrad. What happened to him was that one day he developed, at the age of 34, a malignant melanoma in his ear. And the oncologist that he went to said that his chances of survival with chemotherapy and radiation were less than 50%. So he underwent the chemotherapy, the radiation, and what they did was they actually performed surgery as well. They cut off his left ear, where the melanoma was, and a lot of the muscles in his jaw and neck. So what happened was his face was drooping, and he said he felt and looked like a monster, and he couldn't speak to his clients and his business that he was operating at the time. So he was very, very depressed, and the cancer also came back soon after all over his neck. New nodules developed. And he was directed towards a clinic in Texas that used some sort of treatment called the Hoxsey treatment, Hoxsey, named after Dr. Hoxsey. What he found was that he immediately started to feel better, the nodules softened up on his neck, and his headaches went away. And this was when he decided to learn more about alternative treatments to cancer. And what he ended up doing was practicing in Tijuana in Mexico, treating people who were terminally ill, such as himself. He was a terminally ill cancer patient once who was told that he probably wouldn't survive. And these were the type of patients that he couldn't refuse, and he often treated people for free. What happened was that he had an extremely high success rate, extremely high. And I'm going to read some of the stories from this book below. But if you can't call some of these things a cure, then I don't know what you can call them. But obviously you're not supposed to say that there is a cure for cancer, because there's a lot of legal issues around that. But what he did was he ended up in jail, and he was kidnapped and sent to prison on $5 million bail. Now, $5 million bail is actually basically unconstitutional, and according to one of Ellen Brown's partners in this case, that's basically it's very typical of politically motivated cases. So what I'm going to cover in this video are some of the evidence that the government is basically almost pretty much lying when it comes to talking about alternative treatments to cancer, and also this treatment itself. So Jimmy Keller, he's the man, he's a genius, really. He was sent to prison for saying that there was a cure, that 80 to 100% of patients who did not undergo conventional treatment to cancer could be cured at his clinic, and about 40 to 65% who had undergone previous treatment, including chemotherapy and radiation, could be cured. And this was a deliberate lie on the government's part. There was no mention, Jimmy Keller never mentioned anything of a cure. He actually said that there was no guarantee, and the patients at the trial testified to this. And there was even a tape that of Jimmy Keller speaking on the phone with a potential patient, explaining that there was really he was not guaranteeing a cure. The other thing the government did was that, so they accused him of using a digitron spectrometer radionics device or something. So radionics is a technique. It's kind of like muscle testing, and it basically works on the subconscious mind, and it helps the tester determine what therapies should or should not be used. And basically it's about reading the energetic field of the body. And of course, there's a lot of, if you Google it today, you'll probably read a lot of things on Google saying that it doesn't work, etc. After reading this book and looking at some of the references, I think it does work, but I have yet to try it on myself. So that's what he was accused of. And then what was interesting is that the government, during the trial, picked up a list of 100 patients. They basically made it up. 100 patients, well, they were real patients, but they made up the data that Jimmy Keller treated back in the 80s. And they said that 91 of them today were dead. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean they died of cancer or his treatment. But the funny thing was that a lot of those patients that they said were dead were actually waiting in the patient room, waiting to testify during that trial. So why were they so upset over this treatment? Well, so this treatment is called Tumorex, and it's basically arginine, L-arginine, plus some water. But it was developed by a doctor named Dr. Irons in the 1940s, and he was actually working with the American Cancer Society. When he proclaimed that he had a cure for cancer, basically his funding was cut off, he was fired. So he got some funding from a Presbyterian hospital, Mormon church, and they did a study with 700 patients and found a very high success rate for Tumorex. But the study was terminated, and according to the book, the rumor was that the radiologist of the hospital or whatever said that he was losing, $1 million a year due to this treatment. So something. Basically, the implication is that it was a conspiracy, and it very well could have been. So basically, does this treatment work? I mean, the question is the arginine here. Jimmy Keller didn't just use arginine to treat his patients. He potentized each serum, like a serum that he injected into his patients, with homeopathic therapies that were specific to the client after the radionics testing and muscle testing, which he used a lot. He used other therapies like amygdalin or Lyotril, which is basically a compound that contains the vitamin B17 thing. But he found that arginine Tumorex was much more effective, and that became kind of his staple. But in the book, in chapter, I think, 8, basically lists like all the therapies that he, when Ellen Brown was interviewing him in jail, used, and it's a very impressive list. He also put his patients on a diet that was basically vegetarian with like beans, grains, limited fruit, and raw vegetables and stuff like that. But basically they were to refrain from, they could eat some animal products time to time, but limited. But they would refrain from like heavy foods like ice cream and just junk, basically. Not that all ice cream is junk. I mean, I actually kind of like ice cream now. But, so it was a holistic thing. It wasn't just this treatment, but the government claimed that there were no studies looking at arginine's effectiveness in humans. And there actually were at the time of the trial. So one of the studies that I'll put in the description box below gave 2 groups of rats acetamide, which is a carcinogen. One group actually received also arginine in conjunction with the acetamide. The group that got arginine didn't get cancer. The group that did not get arginine did get cancer. Now that's great, science, clap, 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 clap. But it really pales in comparison to the patient testimonials. And when you have so many patient testimonials, you have hundreds and thousands of them, then it really takes an exceptional mind to say that it still doesn't work. It's not logical. This is where science becomes illogical, because we acclaim science, but then when we have real people who are getting real results, and you say that, no, that's not real science. Well, it takes millions of dollars to publish a study and get that type of data in a study, in a journal somewhere, first of all, and people can't afford that. That's where science and logic kind of separate from each other. Science and common sense trumps science. So the sad thing, besides that, is that the book isn't going to change that much. There's going to be people raving about it. There's going to be people getting angry. Maybe there'll be another Occupy protest or something like Occupy Monsanto, which did absolutely jack shit basically for GMO labeling. Actually, I think it did something. But it's not going to change everything, right? This video isn't going to do that much, because most average skeptic is going to defend based on what's in their head. So it really takes a lot, and it takes a lot of money to get patents for things and get research money and stuff like that. And the people giving the research money may have corporate interests. They will have corporate interests, and they're not going to want to promote things that aren't going to make big profit. So that's why I think a lot of people don't know that there are cures for cancer. There are cures for cancer, and I'm going to say it out loud in front of this video. And donating money to breast cancer research isn't going to help. Chemotherapy and radiation aren't going to help cure cancer. So that's my final message. Pick up the book. If you're really interested, then maybe even try to get some of the contact information of some of the patients listed in the back with their letters. So yeah, it was my pleasure sharing this information with you. You're sure not going to learn about this stuff in school. And I'll see you guys later.